I heard a quote this week that said, "Don't fear for the future. Don't regret the past. Just focus on this very moment in time." And that's what we're doing at Wedgewood. We want to focus on this moment in time and how we can help people that will be in need or that are in need. We've picked 4 topics to kind of discuss this morning. There are many that we could have chosen, but we have 4 that we're going to try to cover this morning. And I will turn it now over to Tom Blanford, who is going to get us started in a discussion about immigration.
Okay, thank you, Melba, and thank you, everyone. One of the most vulnerable groups in our community under the next administration, as everyone knows, will be immigrants. There's a lot of different categories: undocumented, people in mixed families, DACA recipients, refugees, those under temporary protected status, and others just caught up in mass raids. So we have some time to talk about what will happen, what needs to be done, and what will we do. I, of course, have a lot to say about this, but I'm going to attempt to self-mute and just listen to your thoughts.
I think one thing we can be doing is advocating, right, for the necessity of immigration and show like the positive impacts immigrants have had on our communities.
Yeah,
Absolutely. A lot of people are not aware of how much work they actually do, and they want to say they're taking somebody's job, but they're doing jobs that nobody else is wanting to do or looking for. They are a vital source in our community, in the workforce. But also their culture brings so much to our culture to be a diverse nation and a diverse country. I know that there are people who don't want that, but it's just a really tough thing. We've got to be strong. We've got to stand with them. We've got to show them we love them. We've got to be there just like Piglet was there for Pooh. We've got to say, I'm here. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And I think we need to ask them what they need. That's the best way to find out. What can I do for you? What do you need?
Well, and to that exact point, Melba, I think it would be wonderful if we could get connected with some of the organizations that already exist here in Charlotte, that have been doing this work for years, to hear from them in the community. The Hispanic Federation is one that comes. I mean, there are many more, but the Hispanic Federation is one that comes to mind. Because I've seen in the past where people, some sort of crisis happens and people get really fired up, rightfully so, about the situation. And they're like, I want to help. I want to change things. I want to fix things. But sometimes people forget that just because you are fired up about something, that doesn't mean that you are the expert. And sometimes we need to listen to the experts, and the experts tend to be people from those communities. And I've already started to see it in other areas in the last week or so, where people want to try to form, coalitions and mutual aid without really doing the research and seeing who's already doing that. And I think Wedgewood is in a great position to support other organizations and partner with other organizations that are doing that work, because we can't do it alone. I think that's where, we're all stronger together. We're stronger as a community and in Wedgewood, and I think we're stronger as a larger community when we come together as different groups saying, hey, we're on the same team, we're on the same page, let's do this.
I invited Alma Sanchez, who is the director of the Latin American Coalition, to join us this morning. She said she would if she could, but she hasn't come on. But I'll reach back out to her and maybe in January get her to speak to us, because then we'll know more what's going on and what we can do too. So I agree, we've got to connect with these organizations.
Yeah.
Tom, will you share your thoughts with us?
I'm trying not to. All right, so just a few things. One is what I anticipate happening. I think, and they have said that they are going to cancel temporary protective status, which protects and gives work permits to people from El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Sudan, Somalia, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. So that will put all of those people from those countries into undocumented status immediately. And the worst thing about it is, in order to have gained temporary protected status, they had to register. So immigration has a list of the names and addresses of all those people who are here protected under that status, and they can move immediately to them for deportation. A second thing I anticipate is massive ICE raids. In the apartment complex across the street from me, it's probably 90% Latino. And every morning there are maybe 24 women, mostly, and a few men, but mostly women, and dozens and dozens and dozens of children waiting for the school bus. So I have to ask myself what I'm going to do when ICE pulls a prison bus up to the gates of that community and starts loading up those parents. Many of the children are protected because they're citizens, with birthright citizens, but they can certainly take their parents away. So I'm expecting those kind of raids to happen. I think they're going to cancel DACA protection, deferred action for children that arrived with their parents at a young age and that have been in this country for decades, who frequently don't speak other languages than English, many of whom are college graduates. They can cancel the DACA protection with an executive order. They don't need any legislative action to make that happen. So I'm expecting that, again, hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients who also had to register. So the government has their names and addresses. So that's just some of the things that I anticipate will happen. There are almost 200,000 migrants in the Charlotte area, in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Almost 200,000. And so I think the coalition idea is absolutely essential. I think pressure on city and council governments to say, how are you as our government representatives going to protect your constituents? Is the police department going to cooperate with the Immigration and Naturalization Service? Are they going to, as they will be mandated, Trump has said that he will cut funds to the police department if they don't protect and round up, if they don't assist in rounding up who they consider to be migrants. So I'm sorry for
No.
interjecting into this, but
And
what are we going to do is a longer conversation.
yes,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
think about our friends at our bazaar.
Right.
We're talking about those friends. We're talking about, I know last time the bakery was had an ICE search and they took a couple people away that were in the kitchen working that were undocumented, because a lot of our citizens will want to hire undocumented people to help them. And they usually give them jobs like back in the kitchen or somewhere they're not as noticeable. But we've got friends in that community, and we just need to when you start thinking, oh, that doesn't affect me, think about our friends. Think about the people at the International Bazaar. Think about the bakery that we all love so much. Um, and thank you for sharing that, Tom. Any other thoughts or comments?
I think there will be a mighty backlash, a mighty backlash if what Thomas has described goes forward, and it could well. But we keep thinking, what is the good that can come out of this? And I think if people realize that the immigrants are your brothers and sisters, and take it to heart in terms of a legal system, that could have a positive effect overall. But it's too bad we have to go through this backlash kind of situation to realize that, the person to your right and the person to your left, they're your brothers and sisters.
Very well stated.
Yeah.
You muted, Ashanti.
But people don't look at it like that. We do. It's easy. It's easy for us to do. We look at it like that, but a lot of people don't look at it like that. Oh, you're my brother, you're my sister. No, it's like it's not my problem.
Mhm.
That's it's not my problem, and get them out of here because they're a problem. That's what the mindset is.
Mhm.
My question is, it's such a huge thing, the police coming in and taking people away and taking the kids away, taking the mother, father away. But like, what can we do? Wedgewood community, it's so big. What can we do? That's my question. So yet we're here, we understand, we support, we don't agree. But what can we do? We can't go in and stop them. I mean, like you say, you can vote your legislation, but what can we do right now?
Well, that's where we have to connect with these uh, coalitions that are already in existence and ask them, what can we do to help? Tell us what we can do.
Like, does that stop the people from coming in and taking them away? Does that stop that? We can
No.
stop that? No. So what do we do in the interim?
So I won't say no outright. The answer is like yes and no, right? So coalescing with the organizations that are fighting this, one thing that they do is when these legislations pass or these or the acts from the president are signed, one thing they do is immediately take it to the courts. That puts an immediate freeze on any action like that. The court because they have to let it play out in the judicial system first. So I think building coalition with those communities that are already active there. I mean, sometimes all they need is a bit of financial support because that kind of stuff is not cheap, right? Right, having those types of lawyers and going through the system like that is not cheap and takes years sometimes to work its way through. So some of them may just need financial assistance. Others, I mean, there may be others that are going around and talking to the community, talking to those who don't realize how it affects them and how it and it kind of like bringing to light what it's going to cause, what it's going to look like, how it's going to also impact them. And and I think that's where that's another way we could come in as like we can be one of those advocates in the community saying, hey, this is how you will also be impacted. Like you may not think you're going to be impacted, but here is how that's going to play out for you. Here's where you're going to see the negative impacts of this. And so I think that's the best like course for Wedgewood to just kind of coalesce with with the organizations that are doing those things, that are already doing that, and they can help us pivot in the right direction so that we have the most positive impact.
One of the things in Baltimore that was happening during the previous Trump administration, when there was an ICE raid, there was a phone tree of hundreds of people that if anybody saw an ICE raid beginning, the phone calls would go out and people would gather at the spot where the raid was going on, sometimes 30, 40, 50 people. And that made the ICE folks very uncomfortable because they want to do all of this undercover in darkness, out of sight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you go there and stand by just to see, will they stop what they're doing, or?
In some cases, yeah, they called their supervisors, and the supervisors called, "We don't want problems here. We'll come back at a different time."
So why do they do that? Are they illegal? Why were they hiding? Why are they what I don't understand that part. Why you if you're you said that someone's told you you're supposed to do this, but now you're hiding because you're hiding because you're doing something wrong, usually.
Because if it shines a light on the fact that they're taking parents and leaving children behind and the sidewalk, that's very unpopular. But
Okay.
most people are not even aware that that's
Yeah.
happening. So
Okay.
once you have a group of 40 or 50 people, the next thing that happens is press shows up
Yeah.
and TV coverage. And so it
Okay.
shines a light on what's happening that they don't like, that they don't
Okay.
want. They want to just be in and out and head people off to detention camps.
Okay.
So it's a good question, and it's not always effective, but it's a thing. It's something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I get it.
We could go on with this
Yeah.
one issue all day. There's just so much, but we have three other issues, and Liz is going to help us in understanding a little bit about reproductive rights and what's happening there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it can all feel so bleak, but I mean, these are things that have been, and especially in terms of reproductive health, but I mean, everything is tied when you look at it from an intersectional lens. But um, yeah, these are things that have been in the works for decades, and thankfully isn't the right word, but at least in terms of reproductive health, the activists and organizers, people with boots on the ground, have known that, they've been aware of that, and they have been planning for contingencies. Um, but I think it's important to also point out that Project 2025, which is now they're starting to be in the open, saying yes, this was our agenda all along. And so I just want to take a moment to kind of give a really, really brief overview on how Project 2025 seeks to essentially obliterate reproductive health and rights. And these are things that, it's often framed in the media in terms of like, this is a women's rights issue. This is an everybody rights issue. We all have bodies. We all have rights to our own bodies. And regardless of gender, this affects everyone in a variety of ways and can continue to affect everyone in a variety of ways. And it's important to name that because reproductive health is not a women's issue. It's an everybody issue. Women and people with uteruses don't just get magically pregnant by snapping their fingers. There's a lot more to it than that. The basic biology course or a sex ed class, which I guess a lot of people haven't taken for whatever reason, there's just more to it than that. This is an everybody issue. And so Project 2025 proposes basically completely gutting access to abortion, particularly like medication abortion, which is, the pill. And, we have seen in the media, extreme limitations to surgical abortions, which, by the way, are procedures that are quite often done as treatment for miscarriages. Some of the deaths that we've seen in the media lately were women who were having active miscarriages. The pregnancies were not viable, and they were being refused service by the hospitals because those healthcare providers were so terrified of themselves being prosecuted. There was one, I think she was like 18 or 19 years old. She went to the ER 3 different times and they turned her away. And her mother, who was a pro-life person, was begging them to treat her daughter. And they refused. And I wouldn't say it's because they didn't want to. I don't know what their personal feelings on it, those providers, but providers are being put in an impossible position right now. And that's something to bear in mind. A lot of this is legislative work. A lot of this is going to play out in the halls of the General Assemblies across the country, across the nation, but even locally as well. And so that's something that will happen. There'll be broader attacks on abortion access, especially in terms of, who can access care. We're talking about like people who are undocumented. The way that you document access to procedures and who gets them is dangerous, and also denying access in emergency situations, increasing misinformation, disinformation, and stigma. There is a campaign, a propaganda campaign, spreading misinformation. And there's also attacks planned on contraception. This isn't just about like abortion. This is about birth control, the right to say, I don't want to be pregnant, period. Not just I want to not be pregnant. Or, some people want to be pregnant, but for whatever reason, it's not a viable pregnancy, or there are a number of different reasons why, or maybe there's a miscarriage or whatever. And this could have worldwide implications. And so there are some great resources available now, both locally, statewide, and nationally and internationally. Locally, there is the Planned Parenthood, there is the Reproductive Rights Coalition. There are a number of organizations that do cross-topical work. The National Organization for Women, which Melba was a part of for a long, long time, does this work. There's the Guttmacher Institute. There are organizations that are doing this work, and it's so important for us to get involved in some way, because there is absolutely work to be done. And there's also mutual aid that's happening. There are people who are saying, and organizations that are saying this is probably a good way to go about doing this, is you can go ahead and buy certain, like Plan B and certain abortion medications beforehand. So there are people that are stocking up to be able to provide mutual aid, because it's that serious.
Oh my God.
I actually have a master's degree in public health, and I got that degree in 2016. And ironically, my degree is actually in reproductive health and policy. And back in 2016, I wrote my master's thesis on the public health impact of anti-abortion legislation. And God, it looked like sunshine and roses back in 2016 compared to now, even though back then it felt like the end of the world. But now I'm like, oh my God, we did not know how much worse it was going to get, because women and people with uteruses and people who get pregnant were already dying, and it's getting worse. So
There also is an underground railroad of sorts. I do know people in Charlotte who are participating in it and have participated in it, for women to come from other states to get their services here. It's kept very quiet because I believe Texas has even got laws against you being able to go to another state to get the services you may need. But that is happening and has been happening for some time. Like I said, I know a couple women who are participating in that and have had young women come and stay with them to get their medical services here. So there's a lot of things going on that we don't know. And again, we've got to connect with these clinics. We've got to connect with Planned Parenthood and other groups and ask, what can we do?
One of the things that hasn't gotten a lot of attention is what impact this has on medical training. So if you're somebody deciding, you're in medical school and you're deciding on your specialty, what are the chances that you're going to choose OBGYN as your medical specialty, given the uncertain future of where, and also where are you going to go to practice and do your internship? Are you going to go to a state that has an abortion ban? Probably not. And so, and that's the 4 or 5 year lag between the people that are going into that medical field and whether they choose to do it or not. And if they choose not to do it, there'll be a severe shortage of people who are qualified to provide this care for decades. And the parallel I can think of is in the nuclear power industry, where after a few nuclear explosions, the number of people specializing in nuclear engineering went down to almost zero. Programs shut down across the country. People weren't being enrolled. And if we ever decide to reinstate nuclear power as an option for clean energy, which I don't know good or bad, there are very few qualified professionals to pick up that. So something similar could be happening with women's health issues.
Yeah, you're right, Thomas. Actually, there are even the schools, the medical schools that have those specialties, most of them don't allow or don't even provide training on abortion care.
Hmm.
And we're seeing in states like Mississippi, and likely others, OBGYNs are leaving those states.
Right,
And there are some counties without a single OBGYN.
right.
I think that's that when I like with the previous conversation when I say, reaching out and explain to people how it will impact them. This is this is what I mean because they don't realize, they'll say, oh, I'm pro-life, and then I'm gonna vote for the person that's gonna, tighten these restrictions on abortion and don't realize like how loosely laws are written and how confusing. So with it being that way, right, it makes doctors hesitant to even do their jobs when it comes to, like, say you having a miscarriage and need a DNC, right? Because that is still legally and medically, that is an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've already had women in multiple states that have died from sepsis because doctors are hesitant
Yeah.
and are unsure of what qualifies as risk to the mother's life, right? And they've been allowing them to become septic before even attempting the DNCs. And I think those are the pieces that people are missing. Or like how you mentioned OBGYNs are leaving states and counties entirely and creating a deficit of medical field that is very necessary and will only have impacts, for the newer generations as they come up, and I don't think people are grasping that yet, and I think we really need to really push that messaging as best we can, to emphasize that like that's going to be a problem. Like it is a problem already in very red states, counties, like you mentioned, but like it will be a growing problem. I'm registered in a red state, like that's I have a soon to be 2-year-old niece, like this is something that I am concerned about. My sister was just pregnant, nearly 2 years ago. She could have had complications. These are things that people when they hear a phrase or hear something, they're like, and their only thought is, I agree with that, and not what is the overall impact of that. I think that's where the disconnect is.
Yeah.
And,
Or I didn't think it would impact me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people who have concerns about pregnancy or considered maybe high risk pregnancy will choose not to not a lot of them will choose not to be pregnant because they know the health care is not there should they have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister-in-law had a problem years ago and would have bled out had this not been available to her. It ended up in a stillbirth, but I know my brother rushed her to the hospital and said he'd never seen so much blood, but thank goodness abortion was legal at that time, and that's what they had to do to save her life. And there's so many situations like that we don't even know of.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna hear more about them, I'm afraid. All right, well, I think we have time maybe for one more. Ryan was going to kind of address the concerns of the increasing poverty, things that are going to happen that will increase
Yeah.
the poverty level that we believe may happen with Social Security, Medicare,
Mhm.
school lunch programs, all these types of things.
Mhm. Yeah, there are propositions to shutter or reduce different departments and fundings. So we're talking reduction in Medicare, the preference leaning toward eradicating it altogether.
Oh God.
And there's also talks of reducing Social Security by a pretty substantial margin. Like we're talking huge cuts to like 20-30% cuts to security. Like we're talking major cuts to Social Security. And then completely removing the Department of Education. All these things have major impacts on those that on the poorest of us first and hardest, right? So removing the Department of Education, for example, eliminates school lunch, like Melvin brought up, but also, if you have special needs children, the additional funding that is there to help children with special needs comes from the Department of Education. So without that, the schools won't have the resources to help those special needs kids. So then the question is, where do they go? There's not like there's plentiful amounts of schools that specifically work with special needs children. Those are few and far between. And they also are expensive. So if you're living below the poverty line, there's no way you could afford that to begin with, right? Same thing when it comes to Medicare, it is intended to help low income families. If we cut that, then that reduces the available funds to take care of those children in those low income families. It's going to help. It's going to take food off the table, or a roof from over their heads. And I think people, they hear we need to cut spending, we need to reduce spending, but don't hear how the reduction is planned. Wedgewood skews older demographically, right? Cuts to Social Security will be felt by the oldest in our communities. Those some of whom don't have an additional income, like say a retirement, to couple with it. Some are just living purely on Social Security. That gets reduced. That again, we're taking food out of mouths, roofs from overheads, and it's only going to make the situations inside these impoverished communities that much worse, that much harder to deal with. So then the question is, I guess, like, the question I'm posing to you all is, what can we do to reduce the harm that something like these policies can have on our impoverished communities? Nobody?
I mean, I feel like, to be honest, like a lot of these different topics we've just been talking about have similar answers.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is, we need to be in community and work in coalition.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do it all ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Superman is a myth.
I don't know if you said this, maybe you did and I missed it, but one of the executive orders are being written now to be signed on the first day, from what I've read.
Mm-hmm.
And the first executive order is closing the border
Mm-hmm.
and completely. And also the executive order to shut down Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. So that is going to hurt a lot of people too, with not being able to get insurance, because we have millions of people who are benefiting from the Obamacare, but that's one of the first acts they want to cut. So, throw that in the mix too, with people not having insurance at all.
Right.
So there's a lot of things going to happen, and we're just going to have to. I just don't know what we're going to do. Really,
One of the things
it's overwhelming.
that people don't process, many of the people who support these policies don't process, is when you talk about who is low income, who is poor in the United States, they immediately go to people of color. Oh, it's those black people, it's those brown people that are poor. But the reality is the numerically the number of white people that are in poverty is tremendously larger than the number of any other ethnic and racial group. And so when you think about Appalachia, right? When they lose school lunch programs, that's a frequently places or a lot of those largely white communities, that's one of the main food sources, or Obamacare or food stamps or um, any of the other healthcare things. And so I think that as they move forward with this is going to begin to impact a lot of people who supported this administration in ways that they never anticipated it was going to hit them. And so maybe that opens up some opportunities to talk to people that haven't been willing to have this conversation before.
I just hate that we have to wait until the impact is felt before people are willing to listen.
Well,
They got
and
to
we
feel
may
it.
want to begin collecting food for our food pantry again. I'm happy to be the collecting place and drive it up there if you want to drop bags off at my house. Somebody called me this week and wanted to drop some bags off. I said, sure, I'll get them up there. So we may have to focus on that more too.
Yeah,
And
I think
help
that's a
the
good
food
idea.
bank that started at Wedgewood.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That'll definitely help.
Yeah. We have so much we could talk about, and there's so many other topics. I don't think we have time to get into another one, but remember our LGBT community and Presley the trans community. I read the statistics and I had it here that the number of calls to the suicide lines and the mental health helplines went up 125% the day after Trump was elected.
Oh
They
no.
are in tremendous fear of just everything. The marriage, well, he would like to stop the same-sex marriage act, but there are also things specific to transgender that he's going to cut off any funding from the government for various things that are provided for them in healthcare. You can Palestine. We all have Palestine on our hearts, and the fear is that Palestine and Gaza are just going to be handed to Netanyahu. We help so many of our Ukrainian friends, and they are hurting because the Republicans do not want to fund any more money to Ukraine, which means that hands it to Putin. So it's just very long reaching, and we can't get into everything today, but I especially hope that you will contact your LGBTQ plus friends. Ask them if they're okay. Make sure they're okay. Give them a hug. Invite them to lunch. Invite them to come over and have a cup of coffee one Saturday morning. Reach out to them because they are really, really hurting. We'll continue these conversations in the days ahead and weeks and months ahead, I'm sure. But to close,
Before we close, Melvin, could I just say one thing is
sure.
we ended up talking a lot about problems and not a lot about solutions, but I hope having a good understanding of the problems will lead all of us to really focusing on what are we going to do. And that has to be, otherwise we just depress ourselves, right? I
Right.
mean, to lay out the problems is a good start, but it can't be a finish. So I would like to ask everybody to really spend some time in the next few weeks thinking about, so what?
Yeah.
What do we do? What do we do about these things? Where do we focus our energy? Who do we build coalitions with? What are the strategies that have worked elsewhere? What to research ways to move forward? So I hope that that's what happens next out of this conversation.
I agree. I would love for this to be a series, actually. I think this should be a continual conversation.
I agree. And we would definitely revisit it. There's so many topics to cover. And once we know more what exactly is going to happen, I mean, there's a lot of talk, but we don't know what's going to come first or second, or we don't know what's going to happen. So I think at that point, I just want people to know Wedgewood's going to be there. We're going to stand with people. We're going to be there, and we're going to be in community. So encourage you to stay active with Wedgewood, and we're going to need a lot of help in the days ahead. But I wanted to end on kind of a good note. Last week, I was going to read from Langston Hughes, one of my favorites, The Dream Keeper. All of this is depressing and discouraging, but we have got to hold on to our dreams. We can't let our dreams go. We can't just abandon and give up. And I think we've demonstrated this morning, we are not give up people at all at Wedgewood. So I just wanted to read a couple things that he had written about dreams. The Dream Keeper. Bring me all of your dreams, you dreamers. Bring me all of your heart melodies, that I may wrap them in a blue cloud cloth, away from the too rough fingers of the world. Wrap them in a cloth, in a blue cloth, away from the rough fingers of the world. Does that not speak to our times? And one that I've always loved, and I'm sure you have too. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. So we have to hold on to our dreams. We have to still work for our dreams and just keep going one day at a time, living in the moment, not regretting the past, not coulda, woulda, shoulda done, not living in fear, but living in today. And what can we do to help you in your situation? I think that's who we are.